Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Christy Sundquist. I'm the head of open finance at Plaid, which essentially means that I work with banks so that people can connect their financial accounts to the apps and services that they choose. And I'm super excited because the banks that are on stage with me today are not only enabling that for their own customers, but they're also building on top of it and using it to improve their own products and services for their customers. So, without further ado, I want to introduce my panelists here. So first, I have Mark Jones, who's the SVP of Transformation and Modernization at Truist. I have Sumi Sitharaman, the VP of AI and ML at TD Bank. And I have Dee Su, VP and Head of AI Labs and AI Governance at American Express. And between them, they have decades of experience building, governing, and scaling AI inside some of the largest financial institutions and the oldest financial institutions in America. Plaid is 14-ish years old. I think collectively each, they're maybe 150 plus. So today we're going to talk about what AI in financial services actually looks like in practice. The real work of implementing AI in ways that move the needle on customer experience, on fraud, and on risk. So with that, let's get into it. So first, and many of us have talked about this before, the hardest part of AI at scale is really the modeling itself. It's everything that has to be true about your data before your model can do anything. And one thing that we see, and some of us have talked about, is when you're working inside a large institution like yourselves, you've got customer data living in many different places within the bank. Something as simple as an address can have a different format in different places, and maybe it's fine when you're doing a human review of an account, but for modeling, that starts to become problematic. So I'd love to hear about maybe a specific initiative, at your own company that either someone has championed or maybe where someone got stuck. And tell us a little bit about how you got it off the ground. Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. First, just thanks for having me. Excited about the conversation. I think I would say at scale, the unlock for us is really about trust. And what I mean by that is, if you think about trust, for us, it was really important to make sure your governance, your controls, your guardrails are in place, so then your outcomes are trustworthy. And what that looks like for us is our approach to AI is not intentionally not a bolt-on. It's not a plug-in. We are firmly integrating this into an enterprise-wide operating model, and that's going to help us drive performance and outcomes. So really important that the trust is there early, and that will allow you to scale.
Makes sense. Sumi?
Without speaking to specifics, Christy, a common theme I've observed across use cases to get modeling off right is good business engagement. Getting capacity from business resources who deeply understand the domain, the context, and the data, the good, bad, and the ugly about the data, enough to be able to guide implementation talent on what to fix and how much to fix it. That's one. And second, understanding the bounds of what the model does well and does not do well based on the data quality you've fed it, so then you can drive the change management accordingly.
Yeah, I don't think I can share any specific example about company initiative, but however, one thing I can share is scaling AI has more to do with data quality governance than to do with the model itself. One very big priority for us is really about monitoring of the data. Not only about monitoring of the data itself, but also about monitoring of how the data is related to model outcome. So this really requires us to have clearly defined standards with respect to data quality metrics, monitoring frequency, escalation criteria, remediation procedure, et cetera, et cetera. And one very big lesson we have learned is data quality, data monitoring is not a sprint, it's a marathon exercise. This requires ongoing efforts. This is not about one-time and one-off exercise. And this also requires a very clearly defined responsibility and accountability established within the organization. Only then will any AI exercise becomes more sustainable.
Absolutely. And while you're speaking, you've been at Amex 25 years or over 20 years, and you started in fraud modeling and now you run AI governance. So you've seen some things. And you know what it's like to build a model that has to ship, but you also set the rules for what that ship looks like. So when someone brings you an AI use case, what's the thing that's made you think quietly, I've seen this before and I don't know if this is really going to work?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So what I fear is if an AI project fails, it doesn't really fail for the technology, for the model itself. Oftentimes, it fails because the business problem was framed poorly from the start. Some of the red flags I can recall, for example, people say we should use AI instead of articulating the business problem itself. We should focus on model rather than the underlying data. Or sometimes governance becomes afterthought. So when something feels off, usually it has to do with lack of the clarity with respect to business problem, with data, and with the path to production.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. So, Mark, everyone's talking about AI strategy, and I would love to hear something you're actually running in production right now, like a use case, not a pilot or something that's more theory. And what did the path from idea to actually shipping it look like? Maybe what was something that could have prevented it from going live? You and I have talked about customer experience a lot. I'd love to hear more specifics out of Truist on that.
Yeah, so at Truist, we've used AI for some time now, whether that's AI-powered insights in digital channels, whether it's through our Truist Assist. I think the practical example that I would highlight is really the call summarization in our care center. So what that means, right, the benefit that we've seen tremendous results when you think about streamlining documentation to seconds, not minutes. What that translates to for our teammates is there's less after-call work, and they can actually spend more time with our clients actually having the caring conversation. I was going to say the thing that we found, I think, along the way, as you're going through this process, is especially in that experience, is it accurate? Is it compliant? And I think respectful of privacy. That's important for both our teammates and our clients in that perspective. So when we actually designed it, when you think about the client outcome you're after, that actually makes it easier to then design the right controls and the change management in place to actually roll it out safely.
Customer at the center, a revolutionary concept. Sumi, how about you?
The one product family I'll talk about is tabular foundation models. So we call it TD AI Prism. To give you a sense of timeline, we've been at it for about 5 years, roughly. It took us about 3 years of R&D in our lab at Layer 6, which is the COE for TD, to build out the capability and to sort of demonstrate viability, feasibility. And then 18 months of commercialization journey. How do we build the right plumbing infrastructure to be able to deploy these models at scale? And our first set of models have gone live within marketing, powering some of the campaigns. The hard yards for us with that product family, interestingly, has been how do you demystify the tech, make it accessible to business users so they know how to capitalize on it, how to leverage the capability. Not very different from B2B fintechs perfecting their pitch to enterprise customers. So we've had to do the same internally within the organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. And while you and I are chatting, you've been quite vocal about AI being a rising tide that really lifts all boats. But that framing also assumes that everyone's in the same water. And TD is obviously a massive, multinational institution across a lot of different markets, different regulatory environments. So what does it actually take for a company like yours to move the AI needle?
Yeah, it's a great question. The context for that comment was net. it's a positive, right? We see net positive results from AI, the individually across businesses, differential set of outcomes. And to your point, the operating model for each business within the bank is different. The regulatory environment is different. The competitive environment is different. The AI proficiency maturity within the line of business is different. So as we start to build out segment-specific strategies, we're making sure we're being cognizant of the value at stake and what it takes to unlock that value, and we're fine-tuning our approach accordingly. And of course, across the board, at an enterprise level, we're thinking through reusable capabilities that will unlock value regardless of the segment.
So another thing I wanted to talk about was risk versus customer experience, or that's how it used to be. And a lot of us think about them as being managed as opposing forces. So one function's job is to protect the enterprise, and the other is to serve the customer. The idea is that real-time data is supposed to change that. So I'd love any specific examples that maybe you've approved that you would have declined maybe a year ago, or in the reverse. What's changed, and do you have any idea of if it played out the way you expected?
We don't feel risk management and customer experience are competing priority, and oftentimes improving one leads to the improvement of the other objective. For example, if we continue enhancing fraud risk capability, if we continue enhancing fraud risk model, this will lead to a better ability to identify more number of fraud activities, but at the same time, we can also reduce disruption to our customers. At times when we have to really manually intervene, our customers will also feel appreciative of the efforts for us to alert them, for us to remind them of suspicious activities on their accounts early on. So we do believe enhancing risk capability in general will improve both risk management as well as customer experience.
Yeah, and actually, while you and I are talking about risk and just generally monitoring for some of these vulnerabilities around the customers, what's a fraud vector that you are kind of seriously thinking about, or maybe genuinely worried about, that you don't feel like you have a good answer for yet? And when you look at the gap between maybe what you could deploy or what you could have deployed, how much of that is about the tech not being there versus something else?
This is a hard question. Instead of sharing any specific fraud vector examples within the company, what I can share is something that industry is watching very closely is how AI, in fact, can help bad actors, can help criminals to scale and personalize their attacks. This is more about how sophisticated those attacks will become. This also has to do with how quickly criminals can really adapt their attack tactics. Because I'm sure all of us are innovating with respect to AI, but criminals are also innovating. Maybe they're innovating at even higher speed. When they are adapting their tactics, that would oftentimes make some of the historical data, historical pattern less relevant. Also, we may not have as much labeled data. This really requires us to be very agile, to be dynamic, to be adaptive to those attack tactics.
Yep, absolutely. And Sumi, you run TD's AI and ML Center of Excellence, which means that your job is essentially to make AI work across the business, not just for one product or one team. So what's the difference between an institution that has a bunch of AI initiatives and an institution that has true AI capability?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And I think it boils down to disciplined execution. Being very thoughtful, deliberate about crawl, walk, run journeys, especially as we're picking up, evaluating frontier capabilities. So we're being very targeted in how we're evaluating them, assessing viability, feasibility, desirability, building the plumbing and infrastructure, and setting it up for reuse, massive reuse. That's a second piece of it. How do you build patterns and archetypes that are broadly applicable in a number of contexts within the bank, so you enable that scale? And the third thing I want to say, the secret sauce is, doing AI well often requires deep cross-functional collaboration, more so than any other tech initiative. And so how do you set up that org structure for success? So you're building capabilities at scale that travel well across businesses.
Absolutely, and I'm going to ask you a spicy question, which is, from our lips to corporate comms ears, how do you feel like TD is doing in this area when it really comes to scaling something like that?
It's a good question. I was kind of feeling bad for D here, feeling all the hard questions. So we'll take one for a change. I think we're getting better. I'm not going to say we're at the place where we want to be in terms of speed and scale, but we do observe measurable improvement in our execution, in our ability to build and roll out archetypes and patterns across the ecosystem. We now have a number of RAG solutions that are deploying. We now have agentic archetypes that are rolling out across the organization. So we're getting better by the day, which makes me very optimistic.
Awesome. Mark, you have moved through digital identity, open banking, enterprise platforms, and now you're leading transformation and modernization at Truist, which is essentially a career spent trying to get large institutions to change how they operate.
Easy.
So when it comes to AI, where's the gap between what technology can do and what the organization's actually ready to absorb? It's basically the same question I just gave Sumi, but in a nicer way.
I think the gap isn't in what AI can do. I actually think it's in change adoption. When you think across a broad organization, right? What AI is asking us to do is to think differently, to lead differently, right? Getting comfortable with new ways of working, new workflows, how that applies to outcomes. And so I think that's, using judgment of where do I use AI, where does the human still lead? So I think that's an important thing as we drive adoption across the organizations and adapting that change. I think what we've seen, though, is when teammates can actually see AI help them serve clients better, that's when the momentum actually changes.
I didn't catch that last part. You were away from the mic.
I'm sorry, I was just saying what we've seen when it really takes off is when our teammates can actually see the AI in action and they see how it's helping them serve the clients better, that's when the momentum switches for them.
Yes.
That's where the adoption is starting to scale.
For sure. So this question's for all of you, which has to do with the long view, which I know is kind of a complicated question, and it's hard to predict too far out, but AI is obviously moving a lot faster than organizations were built to absorb. And I was saying that earlier, we struggle with it at Plaid in implementation, and we're 14 years old, right? Moving fast is something that we're constantly evaluating against all the things that we've talked about here. You're managing institutions that are 150 plus years old. When you guys think about what the pace of change looks like, how do you think about keeping up and some of the things that you have to do, and where do you want to be a year from now when you think about those things?
I'll just say at Truist, we don't think as much about keeping pace in terms of chasing the technology. I think where we're really focused is how do we actually embed AI in how we operate every day? I think that's what's going to make it sustainable. So if you think of that, what that looks like is pairing innovation with governance, with guardrails, and I think focused on what's the outcomes that our clients will feel. Is it less friction? Is it more personalized experiences? What does that look like? So I think that, from a year from now, what I would say success is how do you scale that consistently? Applying that same model, that same focus on the client outcome and making that at scale, not in pockets.
I'll build on Mark. So echo Mark's commentary on it's important to have the right disciplined critical thinking framework in place to separate fact from fiction, sort of cut through the hype, and really understand what are the material improvements you're looking at, and then going through a rigorous assessment of whatever that delta is from a tech evolution standpoint, is it relevant, useful to the bank, and where it is. And so that disciplined sort of approach to sifting through every shiny object coming at you is critical to keeping pace, because to Mark's point, it's not about doing more and doing it faster. It's about doing the right things faster. And my hope is a year from now, we're fast enough to keep up with the tech in the sense we're learning it and applying it at pace, but not everything, just what we deem is valuable to us at pace.
Great. Okay, on a lighter note, show of hands, who has used AI this week for something that had nothing to do with work? Did you? Okay, Mark?
Mine's car shopping. The good or bad is there's another teenager in the house getting ready to drive.
Okay, car shopping. Teenagers, I hope you get a great price. Sumi?
I've actually discovered LLMs are great at feng shui, and helping me think through. I'm not into feng shui; it's a recent thing, but about a month old. But it's sort of gives me a kick to understand what are the issues with the space and how do you remediate it. And so I've been playing with that a lot.
Amazing.
So for me, just like many people here, I use a lot of chatbots. I feel I can't really live without using chatbots at any hour. I have a hobby. I'm trying to ask the same question to different chatbots, including ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. I'm trying to observe how their responses differ from each other. But in practice, a big help I think I get from chatbots is really to create those practice questions and the learning exercise for my daughter's schoolwork.
There you go. AI is impacting every aspect of our lives. I have recently unlocked a mental load lift in meal planning and grocery shopping through Claude Cowork, which is just taking into account like all of the constraints and things with my own family and just spitting out what I'm making every week. And it's taken the Sunday scaries much, much lower than they've been in a while. So, well, listen, I have been so privileged to have you all on stage with us, and just having these wonderful banks who we not only work with and have for years on connectivity, but really pushing into these new spaces and building the future together is such a privilege. So that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.